first session of the third day of Chess 2021. The session title is Let's Get Physical. And the session chairs will be Elif, Bilge Kavun, and me, Stepan Picek. There will be in total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 very cool papers that we will see some first video of those papers, and then there will be time for Q&A. For questions, there are a couple of options. So please, you can either use Zulip or you can use a chat here to ask questions. And then once we are done with the presentation video, one of the authors of the paper will answer the questions. That being said, Elif, can you introduce the first paper?
So our first paper will be from Fraunhofer Institute, Fraunhofer Isaac, and Technical University of Munich. The paper is called Machine Learning of Physical Unclonable Functions Using Helper Data, Revealing a Pitfall in the Fuzzy Commitment Scheme. And the speaker is Emanuele Streeter. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Your audio is quite garbled.
Oh yes, really? Are you hearing me now better?
Sorry, say it again.
It's very bad quality, but now it was a bit better, but still very bad quality. Can you say something again?
Yeah.
Yes, hello? Are you hearing me better? Hello?
No, it's better.
It's better.
Yes.
It's better? Yeah, let's. I think I have to talk in the right direction. So, okay. Hello and welcome. I will give a little wrap up of our paper, Machine Learning of Physical Unclonable Functions Using Helper Data, Revealing a Pitfall in the Fuzzy Commitment Scheme. What's the setting of our proposed attack? We attack a multi-challenge path, and we think that the path shouldn't have full entropy. The helper data has to be generated by a fuzzy commitment scheme, and the attacker has to know which linear block code has been used. An attacker should have control over the challenges and the helper data, of course. We explain our attack by using the often used repetition code. The included redundancy of the linear block code allows the creation of so-called XOR equations. These XOR equations are nothing else than XORed helper data bits, such that the secret cancels out. These XOR equations can be viewed as a comparison of the same path instant with different challenges. So we see here at the bottom such XOR equation. We use these challenges and the results of the XOR equations to train a Siamese neural network. The specialty about this neural network is nothing that the internal neural networks here in the middle of the picture are sharing their weights, so they can be viewed as one instance of the same neural network. And during training, only one set of weights are trained. But the specifics are also discussed very, very thoroughly in the paper if someone has questions with that. So if we have trained this neural network, we use this network to decode all other challenges in the challenge storage. The resulting noisy response string is either the original or the inverse of the original multi-challenge path response string. So after derivation of this noisy string, the fuzzy commitment scheme is again used to correct errors which have been made by the machine learning model. It depends what output the reference challenge had in the original path, whether you get the original or the inverse of the response string of the path. So the redundancy of the fuzzy commitment scheme and the internal linear block code is used twice in our attack, once during the training to generate these XOR equations, and once during the attack because the fuzzy commitment scheme again corrects error of our maybe noisy output of the machine learning model. So here we see one result. We see in the right bottom corner the success rate of our attack, and we see that already with 800 challenge response pairs, we could train a neural network with which we could decode the original key, the original or the inverse, of course, as said previously. We see also at the top the accuracy and the validation accuracy during training. And the important thing here is that the validation accuracy is a good indicator how good our attack is working. But that's this thing is also discussed in our paper more thoroughly. Yes, what are the takeaway messages of our contribution? In case of a repetition code with 7 bits, only a single key is necessary to learn the multi-challenge path, given that the key is 128-bit. The fuzzy commitment scheme does not counter the entropy loss of the underlying path, so the linear block codes can be used to derive some form of comparison, and we can also train a machine learning model. So we don't need the responses in plain form. We think that the only way to counter this machine learning model attacks is the limitation of the number of challenge response pairs. And one maybe way of mitigating our attack is the usage of more complex or monolithic error correction codes, because then the creation of these XOR equations get very difficult and there are more XORs involved, and it gets harder to train a machine learning model at that point. Okay, that's it from me. Hope you are thrilled to read my paper.
Thank you.
you very much. Are there any questions from the audience?
I do not see any questions in Zoom.
Exactly, and I don't see any questions yet on Zulip chat.
Okay, can I start with a question? I'm very interested because you used Siamese neural network. So can you explain a bit more the motivation why Siamese? Did you use that triplet loss, or how did it go? What kind of loss function you used with Siamese network?
We used the softmax loss function.
Softmax, okay.
Yeah, but the thing is with this neural network, so our XOR equations are nothing else than for each part of the XOR equations, the path was used with a different challenge. And we thought, okay, why to train multiple neural networks for each of these parts of the equation if the instance is the same? So and the Siamese neural network does exactly that internally there are copies of the same neural network, but they share all their weights. So if you train this neural network, every copy has the same weights, and that's exactly what our XOR equation is representing. So it's always the same path that we are training or want to model. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
I still don't see any other questions, but feel free to ask in Zulip chat. If you have time left, we can come back to that, or you can discuss offline. So I switch to the next paper.
Yeah. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So our second paper is Inconsistency of Simulation and Practice in Delay-Based Strong Paths. This is from Ruhr University Bochum, and Anita Agaye will be presenting this paper. Stage is yours.
Hi, thanks for your introduction, Elif. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi everyone, welcome to my short talk, which is a joint work with Amir Amradi. At first, I would like to give you a very brief introduction about POF, which are known as fingerprints in embedded systems. These one-way functions are based on challenge response mechanisms, so I should highlight that our main focus here is strong delay-based POFs. In the POF area, we have several challenges that we will talk just about 12. The first one is a machine learning attack, which are the most common one. These type of attacks can be performed with different classifier or learner algorithms with the aim of generating a proper model for the POF. Afterwards, we would like to focus on the next challenging point, which is POF's hardware implementation, especially the delay-based one, since creating the same delay lines depending only on physical characteristics is quite difficult. The main question here is that if all ML attacks are in the simulation domain consistent with the same accuracy and success rate in the real world. To answer this question, we observe the POF's robustness against modeling attacks in the most common delay-based POF architecture, like arbiter-based POFs and their evaluation matrix like uniformity or the opposite one bias. To be precise, we investigate our result on the case study, which is IPOF and its relevant classical attack like a splitting IPOF, where we have collected our real data set from more than 1,000 various IPOF implementation on 100 FPGA cluster. As I mentioned, our case study in this work is a composite POF architecture, which has more complex model compared to arbiter POF. As illustrated here, the IPOF architecture has two XOR arbiter POFs layers, top and the bottom layer. The one bit response interpose bit of the top layer in one bit response from the top layer goes to the challenge of the bottom layer as the interpose bit. Since the classical LR for the whole architecture of IPOF was not successful with the 75% prediction accuracy, then divide and conquer method of a splitting attack comes to the scene. To be sure, this attack applies LR attack, but for each layer separately, in which the prediction accuracy improves in the several iterations. Then let's be a bit physical. To achieve our main goal, we need to implement IPOF variants and analyze the effect of bias on the applicable attacks. As the case study, we focus on 64-bit 1.5 IPOF as the target POF primitive. We have applied more than 1,000 designs in two different placement patterns in which we can choose the best one to apply on all of our FPGA cluster. But but before we want to explain which design and why that has been chosen for the rest of our observation, we should briefly recall about POF matrix that are effective in POF's functionality. For the sake of brevity, I focus here on uniformity, which is our main criteria in this work. This parameter estimates the proportion of ones in POF response, and the ideal value is 60%. Here in nutshell, you can see the result of the evaluation of our chosen 1.5 IPOF design in terms of different IPOF metrics. As you can see, the design enjoys a high reliability, but not very ideal uniqueness due to FPGA implementation. As we can see here, an almost normal distribution for the uniformity of each arbiter POF instances being in a reasonable range, especially the final response of IPOF. Afterwards, we investigate our real data sets with the existing splitting LR attack based on the simulation results. This splitting attack should be able to successfully break 1.5 IPOF using 500,000 CRPs, either noisy or noise-free. We conducted this attack on our 100 FPGA devices for the same IPOF variant and with the best chosen design. As you can see here, it's leading to the lower accuracy of at most 72%. In order to enhance the prediction accuracy of the attack, we have tried considering a bias parameter in the underlying LR learner, but it has not that much improvement in the prediction accuracy. Since the splitting IPAF attack does not achieve an adequate prediction accuracy when the target path is biased, our attention goes to other learners like ANN, which is almost embedded in the PyPath library as well. At first, we applied the naive ANN as the black box attack, which achieves higher prediction accuracy compared to splitting LR. But with the substituting the LR learner of the splitting IPAF attack with an ANN, which is the here called ANN splitting, we achieve a more stable learner's behavior, leading to a higher narrow prediction accuracy of at most 93%. To be more concrete, it can be seen that our proposed ANN splitting attack not only leads to a high prediction accuracy, but also runs considerably faster compared to naive ANN. In order to verify our result in the simulation domain and finding out the reason behind such an accuracy loss, we repeat the same attack on the same 1.5 and the other 1K and KK IPAF design using simulated CRP sets for various amount of non-uniformity in the IPAF instance for bottom and top layer both. In the simulation domain, ideal point of uniformity, which is 50%, are mostly considered. At the end, I would like to summarize our important points that it means that the high prediction accuracy of this type of paths in simulation are mostly considered in ideal or close to ideal conditions. However, we show that we should verify this result in practice as well. Then the next point is that non-uniformity in the output of the path with a complex architecture can affect successful ML attacks in terms of accuracy or success rate. And the last but not the least point is that an accurate model of the applied path, besides, of course, the ML expertise, can fill this gap between these two domains. Thanks for your listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We may have a quick question, I guess. I'm checking the lib chat. I don't see any questions.
There is something in chat from Zoom, from Nikki. What's the difference between a naive ANN and ANN applied?
Actually, it's the same, the naive ANN or ANN apply, because we have here the approach of ANN splitting. It means that we split the IPAF to the two XOR arbiter path. We use this naive ANN to just show that we use ANN for whole of, as a black box attack for whole of IPAF architecture.
Thank you. Okay, I do not see any more questions, so maybe in the interest of time we can continue, and if there is questions we can return in the end.
Exactly. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Anita.
We are switching to next paper, which is combining optimization objectives, new modeling attacks on strong paths. This is a joint work of MPI Security and Privacy Bochum from University Bochum HGI and the CSO Berlin. And the speaker is Johannes Tobisch. So the stage is yours, Johannes.
Thank you. Audio and video is good?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. All right. I was a little bit worried. Okay. Thank you very much. So Anita already talked about strong paths, and in this work we had a look at another look at the interpose path. So you already know a strong path is a physical security primitive, and it can be used in this very simple change response protocol. And if you care about the security, you mostly care about whether the attacker can build a mathematical clone. So if you can build a mathematical clone, you can impersonate a path and break the security of the protocol. The most well-known candidate for a strong path is the arbiter path, but it has been well known for a long time that this can be modeled as a simple linear model. And this means you need very little data in your modeling attack to build a clone. So you cannot use this directly. So what people have been doing is they build composite designs. They, for example, the XOR path is also well known. And here you just use multiple arbiter paths and in together. But still, this suffers also from attacks. So 2 years ago, the interpose path, or short IPath, was presented. And here you again stack two path primitives together, two XOR paths. You have one, the upper one, which creates an additional challenge bit, and then the lower one is evaluated on this longer challenge. And this is hoped to be a more secure design. From a very high level perspective, what you do with modeling attacks, there are two broad categories. You have these classic attacks, and here you just use challenge response pairs. And you try to learn the whole model at once, basically like your classic classification setting in machine learning. And this works, but the observation is that the training data that you need is exponential in size in the number of arbiter paths of your design. But for most common or for most feasible path instance sizes, you can still use this attack. However, even more devastating are so-called reliability attacks. And here you take additional information into account. You not only look at the response, but you look at how reliable a response is. You can do this. You can take a path and query it multiple times for a single challenge, and you can check how likely it is that the response will flip. And this gives you an optimization problem, basically. And whenever you solve this problem and you minimize it, you get a candidate for one of the arbiter paths in your design. So you need to solve this problem multiple times and explore all the minima to learn your whole model. The advantage of this attack is that it only needs a linear training set size. So you need much less data to break the path. Now the iPath, it was hoped that was secure against both of these attacks. Last year CHEST was already shown that classic attacks can be improved. And what we do in our paper is we show that reliability attacks can be applied to this path. I already said that for the reliability attack, you need to solve an optimization problem and you need to explore all minima. And the security argument for the iPath was that they built it in a way that some of the minima are really unlikely to be found. So you cannot build a model of your whole path, and then you cannot predict responses well. And now the core idea of our attack really is that we say, okay, you can modify your optimization target. So once you have found one of the minima, you can say, I don't want to go here again. So you add an additional term that basically removes that minimum from your target function. And this enables you to explore other minima as well. This is basically in one slide, the core idea. And what's the takeaway result? Based on with our attack here shown in blue, you are already back again in this regime of linear scaling. So if you increase the security parameter, that is the number of arbiter paths in your design of the iPath, the training set size only goes somewhat linearly. And you can break even really large instances like the 110, 112, 114 iPath. And this is in contrast to the other attacks are shown here, which are in the classical regime. And here it's not feasible to break this really large paths. So what would you find in the paper? Actually, what we did is we created a tech framework where we combine the classic and the reliability approach. So we use all the information at hand to conduct the modeling attack. And actually, there are quite some details on constraints and how we did the optimization, because even with these ideas at hand, it's not so straightforward to break the iPath, and there are some technical challenges there. And maybe looking at further future work, one idea would be to check, can we use some of the benefits of the iPath? Can we find a generalization, maybe better design, or are all designs broken? So this would be another way to look at it. Can we maybe get an impossibility result? Can we prove that all arbiter path-based designs necessarily fall victim to this kind of reliability text? But that's just a guess at this point, just a hypothesis. That's already everything I've got.
Thank you. Questions for Johannes?
No questions yet on the web chat.
Yeah, Benedict has a question. Sure, Benedict?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the talk. You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you go one slide back, please? To, I think it was slide number 6.
Yes.
Yes, this one. So you said the attack complexity now kind of just scales linear in the number of the arbiter paths. And
Yes.
I was wondering, so how does the number of losses that you would try in your attack, how does that scale? with the number of the arbiter puffs? Like, is that exploding? No, on one slide earlier, you showed that you have you try these different losses, right? And
yes.
Does this depend at all on the number of the arbiter puffs?
Yes, this is a really good question. So this is basically our core idea here, but we actually didn't use this in practice because exactly as you say, we have to add losses again and again and again, and we found that this was not the best way to go at it. So what we actually do is we learn the whole model at once, and we have multiple arbiter paths that we learn in parallel, and we force them to not become similar. So we force each of our candidates to go into a different direction. And that way you don't have this problem of adding losses again and again and again. We found this to be a better solution, basically. But
okay,
the core idea is the same.
Okay, thanks.
There's a question, I guess.
Thank you. There is a question from Wei Cheng. So the dataset is from real device or from simulation?
Yes, this is from simulation because the simulation allows us to do this scaling, to have a look at the scaling. And we also use simulations because, in the original IPAF, arguments were basically given on simulated data. And this is kind of the ideal setting because the weights are not correlated, and yeah, this is kind of the state of the art of it.
Thank you. Okay, let's continue with the next talk. Thank you, Johannes.
Thank you very much once again. So the next talk will be probably secure hardware masking in the transition and glitch robust probing model, better safe than sorry. This is work from UC Louvain, and the speaker is Gaëtan Cassier. The stage is yours.
If you're speaking, we don't hear you at the moment. So you'll just need to unmute.
Seems unmuted, but maybe there's a problem with the sound.
If you're using headphones that have a microphone attached, you may try unplugging those if you can.
So it doesn't seem to work. Shall we maybe continue with the next talk, and then after the next one, return to this one to give Gaëtan a couple of minutes to resolve the issue?
Yeah,
yes, I think that's...
Yeah, probably it's better to do so.
Okay, can you take the speaker into a breakout room that they can try it there?
Yes, I
breakout
can.
Room?
Yes. So I'm going to open a breakout room to give this speaker some technical help. And so nobody else go into it.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we skip to the next one. It's exploring crypto physical dark matter and learning with physical rounding towards secure and efficient fresh keying. So this is also work from UC Louvain, and the speaker is Char Momo.
All right, I'll just share my slide. Okay, you should see the slide.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thanks for the introduction. So to start to motivate a bit of work, we'll start with the well-known Symmetry cryptographic setup where Alice wants to speak with Bob in a secure manner. So for that, they both know a secret key value K that they both use either to encrypt some data in the case of Alice or to decrypt some data in the case of Bob. And such a configuration has been and is still analyzed often, and it has been proved, in fact, that there is, in fact, a lot of solution where an adversary that has access to this encrypted data cannot recover information about the protected information or the key. But starting 2 decades ago, approximately, it has been shown that such a black box consideration is not really useful because there are different effects that can be involved in the settings. And these effects comes from flowing implementation or physical effects that can leak information about the data that are manipulated. And this, in fact, leads to attacks that are known as side channel attacks. And in the context of power side channel attacks or physical side channel attacks in a more broad sense, a popular countermeasure has been introduced, which is the masking. But this countermeasure appears to be costly, and especially in the context of block cipher implementation, because of the nonlinear operations that are inherent to this block cipher. There is a cost-reducing alternative that has been proposed, the racking, and this racking mechanism can be summed up as follows. So the basic is the idea is that instead of directly using the secret value key the secret value k as the key, sorry, we will instead derive a new fresh and temporary key k star using easy to protect racking function. So the easy to protect racking function is denoted here in the figure as RK, and this is the blocks that are in dark gray in the figure. So put in another way, the main idea is there is a separation of duties between an easy to protect racking function that is used only to derive this new fresh key, and this fresh key is then used by a cryptographically strong function that is used to process the data. However, specifying unified properties for this racking function appears to be challenging. And it turns out, in fact, that from the solution that can be found in the literature for the moment, this solution try, in fact, to manage a bit the trade-off between the efficiency of the racking function and the physical assumptions that are made to design the security of their racking function. And among all the different treat models that have been already considered in the literature, we are placing our work in the middle of these by exploring, in fact, the treat model where an adversary is able to obtain the leakage value of this new fresh key that has been generated by the recurring function. For our work, we took inspiration of the weak PRF proposal of Bonnet et al. In their work exploring crypto dark matter. And in fact, they propose an insert of weak PRF that can be summed up as follows. So first, we have a dot product between a binary matrix K and a binary vector R. The R is a random binary vector, in fact. And once we have done this dot product, we output the value Z by summing, in fact, all the result of the vector obtained by the dot product, and we sum all of this value modulo 3. And these two operations can be, in fact, abstracted as a combination between two main operations. So first, there is the dot product K times R, and there is also a mapping that comes in top of it. And why we took inspiration of such a weak PRF? Because, in fact, there is kind of interest for rigging based on this weak PRF proposal, because we can see that the dot product K times R can be seen as an operation that should be computed in order to obtain this fresh new key K star. And this operation is, in fact, easy to mask additively. And the mapping function here can be, instead of being explicitly computed, being seen as the an implementation. So here we will consider that instead of having an explicit computation of this map operation, we will use, in fact, the physics of the implementation to perform this map operation. So what are the contributions that we have made in our paper? We have first proposed, in fact, a new racking scheme, so which is defined as follow. We obtained a new fresh K star by performing a dot product between a matrix K times concatenation between a vector R and the value 1, where all the values are not binary anymore, but are in a prime field. We consider more particularly an instance where the parameter defined here, mn, are equal to 4, and the prime that we consider is the Mersenne prime 2 to the power 31 minus 1. We did security and performance analysis for this recurring scheme, considering that the leakage function is the well-known Hamming weight as a first exploration case study. And for the security of regarding side channel attacks, we did in fact proof of concept implementation on FPGA. And we consider in the whole paper two main attack paths for the security analysis. A first one, which is more a cryptanalysis, a mathematical cryptanalysis path, which is defined here as the attack path 1 in red. So mainly we have to check if the leakage value of the K star key cannot provide any information on the long secret key K. And we define the second attack path, the attack path 2, which is more related to side channel attacks and related, in fact, to the computation of this dot product for a masked implementation of the dot product. To sum up a bit the results, we showed, in fact, that such a solution can provide cryptographic properties. And more importantly, this is really more efficient than what can be currently found in the literature. And these two figures, in fact, sum up a bit this result. To the left, you can find a randomness requirement of our masked implementation for the dot product. And we can see that the cost is linear regarding the amount of share that we use. And to the right, you can find some results about our security analysis for the physical security. And we can find that the data complexity required, in fact, to perform a DPA increase exponentially with the amount of share. And these two figures combined show that we can have an exponential security using linear cost, which is in fact cool for a masked implementation. So what's next? We define three next research paths that we can follow. The first one is the generalization to a broader class of leakage, because here we consider only the Hamming weight case. So we can just look for a more general leakage function. A second one is to evaluate a bit the impact of parallelism of the hardware implementation that we consider, because here we consider a rather parallel implementation that we're performing 5 multiplication in parallel. So we can see a bit what's the impact of serialization, for example, that such realization can be in fact found in software implementation. And we can look also for practical integration of this recurring scheme in a leakage resilient mode. So that's it for me. I'm glad to answer any question.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Seems like there are no questions on the live chat.
Okay, also no questions in the Zoom chat. So maybe I can ask a very quick small question.
Yeah.
So you say what's next, and you have a couple of, so part 1, part 2, and then practical integration. But what would you consider to be the best direction really to follow? So really going for the generalization or evaluating the impact, because both sound very, very relevant. But which one do you consider to have the more impact potentially?
That's quite a hard question, because I would say it really depends on the constraint that you have for your application. But for me, in fact, both are really important. But I would say that for a more generic point of view, the generalization to broader class of leakage is really, really important. But on the other hand, the fact that you can have, if you want software implementation, for example, even if you have the generalization to a broader class of leakage, you cannot have, in fact, for our analysis, you cannot have good security if you serialize really a lot your computation, because in this case, you can break your maxed implementation quite easily. So really, you have to do both in parallel for me.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Let's continue with the next talk.
So I'll ask Gaetan first if everything's ready.
Does the mic work now?
Yeah, so we can hear now.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's switch back to previous talk, and let me introduce once again. So this is about probably secure hardware masking in transition and glitch robust probing model, better safe than sorry. And the speaker is Gaetan Kasia.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and sorry for the technical issue. So the starting point is masking, as we all know. If we want to mask this small circuit on the right where we have just a single XOR gate, 2 registers, so in practice flip-flops, and then an AND gate, what we will do is replace each wire with a sharing of the wires that are taken independently. Here we can see A1, A2. Then we replace each gate with a so-called gadget that implements the gate, but in the mask domain on the shares. So here we have a gadget for XOR, a gadget for register, and a big gadget for the AND gate. So that's the starting point, and this works very well. We can have security, asymptotic security, even noisy leakage, but assuming that we have leakage that is kind of arithmetic, that is each wire leaks independently. However, so that's the deprobing model. Basically, when you do here one observation, it should be independent of the secrets. In practice, however, we have CMOS secrets, and those are leakage characteristics, which are not just we leak one value at once, but we can have other characteristics such that, for instance, when you have glitches in your circuit that propagates through the combinational gates, and this makes your leakage depend possibly on all of the inputs of a combinational circuit. So if you want to model this in the T-probing model, you will extend this model to the glitch robust T-probing model, where instead of having just one wire when the adversary puts one probe, he will get all the inputs of the related combinational circuit. So that's a first kind of physical effect we want to consider here. Another kind would be the transition. So here, if I take the 2 circuits, one that would be a first cycle of execution and the second one would be a second cycle of execution, the adversary that puts a probe on circuit can detect the transition between the 2 values, because the CMOS gate will depend, the consumption in current of the CMOS gate will depend on both the initial value and the final value of this wire. So if we model this, we have the transition robust probing model, where basically one probe of the adversary will give him the value of those 2 wires for two consequential execution cycles. And then if you look at it, actually, we can have both glitches and transition at the same time, and they can combine. That is, when we have this clock cycle that leads us to this state, we will have a lot of glitches, and this settling in the state of this wire will depend both on its previous state and on the glitch that you have on all these previous wires. So if you want to model this, you have our glitch plus transition robust probing model, where the adversary using only one probe will get access to all the wires that are input to the combinational circuit, but for 2 clock cycles. So that's the model. And if you want to be, like usually in the literature, we are considering more glitch for hardware implementation and transition for software implementation. But there's a kind of simplified dichotomy, because it's like where we see issue in practice that they come from, but in principle, you could have both issue, for instance, in the hardware implementations. And actually, this has been shown recently in some papers. So, yeah. We want to prove security in all those models. So if we look first only to glitches, that's one of our previous work. And you have been able to prove a composition theorem that says if you have one gadget that is secure without glitches, or a lot of gadgets that are secure without glitches, you compose them so that in a case where no glitches you can still have security, for instance, using strategy based on SNI, NI, Piney, and so on. So that's a glitchless composition. You can have from there a direct glitch robust composition if all of your gadgets are glitch robust themselves, which is a quite weak condition. Usually, like all hardware gadgets are glitch robust, and of course, if they still satisfy the same properties in terms of, for example, being SNI. So now, if we want to look at transition, which is the work of this paper, you have been able to prove a similar composition theorem. That is, we can compose a gadget in the glitch and transition robust probing model. But here we need a stronger hypothesis, or it's a more particular theorem. We need all the gadgets to be opiny. And opiny is a new definition we introduce here. That's a bit stronger than Piney definition. But that's still nice because all linear gadgets are trivially Piney, so they are not costly, and really provide new construction for opiny multiplication gadgets, which are not too expensive compared to the state of the art, let's say the Piney one. So the overhead is quite small. As you can see, if we do HPC, so Piney implementation versus this opiny implementation, the overhead is not that huge. So that's one solution for solving the case of transitions. And then in the paper, we analyze another solution, which is quite intuitive. Let's see, in this example, we want to evaluate an SPN. We'll use bubbles in our pipeline to avoid transitions. The idea being that here, every time we switch of state or to the next cycle, every other cycle we have a cycle where the data would be non-sensitive, for instance, 0. Therefore, the transitions that you can have, the adversary can probe transition between those two states, he will not learn anything interesting more than just probing this value. So the transition doesn't learn more. And so if you want to evaluate this SPN, at the first cycle, we evaluate the first S-box of the first round. Then you leave one cycle empty, and here, if our S-box is two-stage, then you have this state is in the second stage. And then the third cycle, you can evaluate the second S-box, and so on. You have the third S-box. And finally, if you have three S-box, at the final round, we can go, at the final cycle, we can go to the next round, to the first S-box, and so on and so on. The main drawback of this is that it increases, it reduces the throughput because every other cycle is just lost. But the nice part of it is that we don't need any extra constraint on how we build our gadgets, so we can only be glitch robust from the gadgets, and then from the structure, the way we use them, we can have transition robustness as a bonus. So that's quite trivial, actually, as observation. And the nice part of it is that we have been able to prove that if you have a composition strategy that's spiny for those gadgets, then you can do something a bit better. That is to avoid those bubbles if you are gadgets that are in parallel. So for instance, S-boxes in the same round of a block cipher. And so this would give this result, which is actually much nicer in terms of throughput, because the only pipeline bubble you have here is actually needed for the architecture. Because if you want to go to the second round, you will need to have finished this last round. So this is kind of mandatory. You can never skip it. As long as your S-box is more than one cycle latency, you will need to have this bubble. So actually, this comes from free. For example, in our previous HPC paper, the present architecture we presented was our AES architecture to add this property. So you don't need to change anything to the implementation. And in the end, you get, in addition to glitch robustness, you get transition robustness for free at no change in the architecture, not even for the latency or throughput, which is quite nice. So this contribution is, as far as we know, the first provably secure glitch and transition robustness circuit. And we can prove it for existing masking heaps, so at no extra overhead, and for new one where we have generic composition theorem. I would say if we want to continue this line, a natural future step, as we have seen for many works in masking, is to have automated verification and maybe one day automated generation of this countermeasure based on an abstract description of the cipher. So thank you for your attention. I'll be glad to answer any question.
Thank you for your talk. Questions?
There's a question in the live chat from Jürgen Polkus. For glitch robust Piney, the input-output latency of one response 2 of HBC2 seems to be optimal. If you want to have glitch robust or Piney with trivial composition, then the latency of your constructions goes up to 2 response 3 cycles. Do you think you can get constructions with lower latency, keeping trivial composition without bubbles?
I would say I'm not convinced that the glitch robust Piney 1 versus 2 is optimal. I believe it should be possible to do 1 and 1 latency. Less than that seems to be impossible. And then if we add that for a glitch robust Piney, we would have then, I believe, for Piney quite simply 2 and 2 latency. Then going back to 1 and 1, I'm not sure it's possible, but I wouldn't say it's impossible. It would probably increase strongly the cost in randomness.
Okay. Thank you very much. There's one more question, I guess.
Zoom, yes, from Mickey. Provable security sounds a bit strong. What is the reduction problem in this provable security?
Okay, so this is provable security in the glitch and transition robust probing model, assuming that we have perfect randomness. So I would say the first one is this probing model where we assume the adversary has T probes. This is not the practice, like practice is noisy leakage, and the traditional reduction from one to the other is quite loose and requires many shares. As we have seen previous day, having probably secure in the region probing model would already be better. And of course, in practice, you have the question of how to generate perfect randomness.
Thank you. Okay. In the interest of time, let's go for the last talk.
Exactly. So our last talk will be learning parity with physical noise, imperfections, reductions, and FPGA prototype. So this is a joint work of UC Louvain and Shanghai Jiatong University, and our speaker will be David Abelizia.
No, it will be Clément Hoffman. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can
sorry,
see you.
There's a change. It's Clément Hoffman, I guess. Sorry for that.
Yep, no problem. Let me share my screen. Okay. So I will talk to you about learning parity with physical noise. So first, quick stop on learning with parity noise, which is a learning problem. So computationally hard problems that can be used for cryptography. Learning problems have been used widely in the last decades, mostly learning with errors and for post-quantum schemes and all its variants. But learning with parity noise is a more minimalist one. Basically, as in any learning problems, an adversary is given public vectors and noisy scalar products between a secret key and these public vectors. And all the operation occurs over F2. So the error is binary and generated with Bernoulli law. This problem seems simple, so we may think that its implementation will be too. However, sadly, it is not the case, mainly because we need a secure PRNG to generate the error. If the PRNG is not secure, then adversary will be able to predict the error, therefore remove it and solve the linear system and retrieve the key. So this PRNG proves to be expensive in time and a weak link against side-channel attacks. Our idea, in order to get rid of it, is to use inexact computing. The idea of inexact computing is to use a processor in a controlled environment, in our case, voltage overscaling and clock manipulation, so that it will not perform correctly, and we will end up with a faulty output, but with a controlled error. So basically, instead of correctly computing an inner product and adding a generated error, we directly compute a noisy scalar product, inner product. Sadly, we do not manage to perfectly control the error. Mainly, we see output dependencies, which means that the probability of error depends on the correct output value of the inner product, which is not a property we want for cryptographic use, because the correct output of the inner product is linked to the key. So we denote by delta the distance between those probability of errors. We want to mitigate this delta as much as possible. If we reach a delta of 0, it means that our error is perfectly balanced and we are in the LPN case, everything is secure, it's great. So we consider different hardware architectures to compute our physical inner product. And the best one we ended up with is a parallel architecture. So one layer of AND gates, then parallel layers of XOR gates with a jittery clock. So to explain it shortly, it's a clock manipulation that allows us to induce data-independent errors. And we end up with a simulated delta of less than 1%, which is small, but sadly not negligible. So it means that a cryptographic primitive built on physical inner product cannot rely directly on the security of LPN, which leads us to our next contribution, a security reduction of our problem to LPN. So first, we define our problem as learning with parity noise with output dependencies. LPNOD is a theoretical problem, whereas the physical inner product is a physical problem. So LPNOD is just a modelization of our problem based on our observation. It's basically the same as learning with parity noise. The only difference is there are two noise parameters. One if the correct output of the inner product is 0, one if it's 1. The idea of our reduction is we see that LPN is a particular case of LPNOD. It's a balanced case. And we managed to build an algorithm that allowed us to transform LPNOD samples into noisier ones. So that means that an adversary which has access to an LPN Oracle solver and a batch of LPNOD samples can use our algorithm to transform them into noisier LPN samples, then use its solver to retrieve the key. So that means that with some assumption on the parameters, LPN with output dependency is at least as hard as LPN. And amusingly, this reduction works the other way around because we can also transform LPN into LPNOD. So the other reduction is less interesting, but still pretty cool. At the end, we managed to quantify the loss in parameters in order to reduce from LPNOD to LPN. And we will be able to use this formula for our concrete implementation because we built an FPGA prototype on a Spartan 6 with a Sequoia board that implemented a physical inner product. This physical inner product reached a delta of 5.8% using a dummy circuit that induced data-independent error. And using our reduction, the formula from our reduction, we can claim 80 bits of security with a cryptographic scheme relying on this physical inner product. So to put it in a nutshell, inexact computing applied to LPN allows us to get rid of the secure PRNG, which means improved performances and better design against side-channel attacks. So the cons are that our problem now relies on a physical assumption rather than a theoretical one. And it induces data-dependent error, but they can be handled at a small cost with our reduction theorem. The next step will be to try to reach more complex primitives, such as post-quantum ones, with learning with physical errors, for instance. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any question?
Thank you. I see no questions in Zoom.
Also nothing on Zulip, and we would advise people to go to Zulip chat for any questions because we are way out of time.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Probably.
Indeed, people, if you have questions, please use Zulip. I hope Clement will be available for answering. And
Sure.
since it's already 9, I think the new session is already starting. So thank you all for your attention and see you in a new session in a